Welcome, guys. It's Wealth Wednesday, and I'm excited, and I have had a an intense week. I can always count on an intense week, and that is par for the course when you're starting, when you're in the beginning stages of a new business. So I can't complain. I'm doing what I love. I'm doing what I want to be doing, and I should not be complaining. I'm happy. And one of my Facebook friends wrote this. It's a nice quote too, just kind of describing how much work it takes to create something. He said, "It's hard, but it's fair. It's hard work. It's gonna not be pleasant, but in the end, you're gonna get what you put in for the most part. And yeah, and you could get more than what you put in, and it could be good. So I'm just focusing on what's ahead of me and keeping my head in there. So that's a little bit about um, my the week so far. And so, with that being said, you guys, I want to cover just what I'm going to be talking about today. Today, I'm going to talk about the importance of ownership when it comes to wealth building. Um, and what does that even mean? What should you be owning to build wealth? What are the key things to own? Uh, the primary source, primary things to own when it comes to wealth building. So, yeah, when it comes to wealth building, not everything is equal. They're not all equal. Different types of resources, assets, yield different result. And so, yeah, I want to talk about that today. With that being said, then I want to talk about some current event stuff. That it's affecting America, affecting that's in the mainstream, namely Candace Owens, Black Lives Matter, and a little bit about Minneapolis and my local climate here and how things, all that, affect me. So, with that being said, let's dive into it. All right, so let's talk about, I've been looking a lot at Candace Owens this week. She's been sort of like the Republican soundbite for, a soundbite with regards to this George Floyd situation. And for most of you, I mean, everyone knows what's happened with George Floyd. He was the unarmed black man who was killed by the four Minneapolis police officers. So she's been talking her point, and then I'll give her point, then I'll give the Black Lives Matters point. Her point is the issues that are, George Floyd is a man that had a lot of record, had a checkered past, running with the law. He's not was not an exemplary citizen, and the fact that he's being looked at as a martyr in our society is in our community is a wrong thing. She hasn't necessarily said that the fact that his death was just or anything. It's just I just feel like the timing for her to be saying these things is wrong. So she's kind of put herself in like harm's way, in like in the heat, the fire, so to speak, because she's getting a lot of backlash for speaking the way she's speaking on these issues on George Floyd. So like she's talking about George Floyd's situation, and then she's talking about other issues that plague the black community. She's talking about the lack of quality education in our country for black people. She's talking about the illiteracy rate. She's talking about uh, the high crime. She's talking about just the Democratic Party patronizing black people, using black people as their lapdog. She's talked about a lot of different things when it comes to like the current situation and currently what's happening. She's just describing the black community. Um, so now I'm going to talk about Black Lives Matter. She's talking about the same thing I feel like she's talking about the same thing that Black Lives Matter talks about. So the Black Lives Matter movement, and the way I understand it, is asking for fair treatment of Black people, asking for legislation. Primarily lately, what the main issue that everyone's seeing as it relates to George Floyd is police brutality, asking for a complete overhaul of the legal system and how they polices communities of color and Black communities, I should say. So that's what you see when it comes to Black Lives Matter, just really equal treatment of Black people in America, and that comes from they point out all the different systemic issues like medicine, the medical industry, prison, um, just civil life, and how in education they point out everything. So Candace Owens and Black Lives Matter are kind of pointing to the same issues that plague our community. She just has Candace Owens and the Republican Party have different reasons for why they think these issues are plaguing the community. Namely, the Republican Party, Candace Owens, they seem to think that our community has all these issues because of the lack of Black fathers, the just the collapse of the family structure, all these different issues, lack of religion, all these, all these different issues that they feel like are responsible for these things. It's rare that they point out systemic racism. It's rare that Candace Owens would talk about saying systemic racism really does exist. Um, I've caught her in one of her videos, pointing out white supremacy in a way. Um, so, but for the most part, she doesn't really address racism as the issue. Black Lives Matter, on the other hand points out the systemic racism. It's that systemic racism is responsible for all these things that we're seeing. So it's interesting because when I look at both arguments, I see that they all have valid points, of course. However, I feel like both sides, you know, I feel like Candace Owens talks about how racism is not responsible for any of the stuff that's going on. Uh, she points out that there's racism on the Democratic Party side in the mainstream and the media and all these different arguments. Black Lives Matter, you know, points out all these, like, pretty much says racism. Um, our people have been given an unfair shake of the current situation today. With that being said, my opinion on this is there are a lot, they all have valid points. And what I've been seeing in the media lately is this. I've been hearing a lot of well-intentioned white people saying out there that they can't begin to understand what Black people are going through in our society. And to me, that's baffling because I'm of a mindset that, like, you can't say that you can't begin to understand what Black people are feeling or what Black people go through every day. We're neighbors. Look around you. You can see how your life is slightly different than our lives. You can see where there's a huge concentration of Black people. There lacks lack of services. The police don't go there on time. You can see that there's lack of wealth, well-being, terrible education system. We usually call it the ghetto, and everyone knows where the ghetto is and know what life is like in a ghetto. What life is like being poor and of color. Everyone understands that. So when someone says, "I can't believe the mainstream media response to Black Lives Matter and all this stuff," like, life is really hard. Systemic racism is responsible for this. I can't understand what life is like. You can't. Use your imagination. We're all in this together. We're all Americans. That's my opinion. Um, you can't say that, like, we, we're leading some alien life that you can't begin to fathom. We're human beings. You can see how you have a different life than the guy next to you, and you can see most of the issues that were sent before, that were like that we all inherited, that we're not all necessarily responsible for because we inherited it. We're all responsible for continuing systemic racism and its benefits and its negatives. We're all responsible for this. We're all in this together. We all owe it to one another to change this. I don't want to hear anyone talking about how it's just so like different and so weird that what we black people go through in America is so foreign for them. That's patronizing, and we need to stop that. And that is a part of the problem. So that is my opinion on that. And that's all I have to say about that. Uh, there are a lot of hurdles out there, and one of the things that I want to point when it comes to Candace Owens's views is on the other side here. There, the argument that I hear her make is one of black pathology, and a good scholar and writer Carol Anderson writes a book called White Rage, in which she talks about through the history of America, whenever there's been a legislation to benefit people of color, black people, and black people, they, you know, angry whites, racist white people that exist out there. I'm not saying that all white people are racist. I want to be clear in what I'm saying. I'm saying racist white people, fearful white people that are out there they don't take to the streets, they don't protest, they go to the court, they legislate, they lobby, and they put roadblocks in front of those legislation, like the civil rights movement that happened back in the 1960s. It started in the 50s and continued through the 60s, and they've put a lot of roadblocks in front of those. They've put a lot of um, blocking in front of voters' rights, civil rights, women's rights, all these different rights. They've stood in front of all these different gains in civil rights. So stop and frisk in New York, all these different things. Sorry, excuse me. So I so basically I'm really saying that this is what stops us from progressing. We have a lot of people out there who are against progress, um, who will do whatever it takes to stop and keep you know things the way they are. And that's sad because there are real issues that we can all address together. And I'm not naive, but Black Lives Matter, Candace Owens, Candace Owens' argument is really always about black pathology. What's wrong with our community? We're sick. There's something wrong with us. Is why we're the way we are, and we can't blame it on racism because racism is not responsible for our own sickness. We need to cure ourselves of our sickness in order for us to move past where we are now. And Black Lives Matter is talking about, oh, systemic racism is what's wrong with us. When you remove it, we will flourish. So between those two arguments, you guys, and it took me a while to really understand what I'm really trying to argue here. Between those two arguments, I feel like it's a common ground of understanding that there's something that needs to change here. Something that needs to change, and we all need to come together, put our heads together, and try to work on these issues instead of pointing finger. I feel like both parties, Democrats, Republican, have utilized black people, people of color, as pawns for political power. I feel like once we as a community and all of us in America recognize that our two-party system is flawed, I feel like we'll go further and we will address issues because everyone knows that that's the real problem with America right now. So, with that being said, you guys, that's all I have today, about the current events. Uh, so, so for this episode of Wealth Wednesday, I want to stress the importance of ownership when it comes to building wealth. You know, not just owning anything, not just owning a house, not just owning the car you drive, not owning all of those. I'm talking about owning the right assets. I've talked about building assets, building, and for those of you who are just started watching my channel, assets, just like Robert Kiyosaki says, he says that asset is something that puts money in your pocket. All right. And a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket, doesn't pay you, just drains you. It's pretty much expenses. All right. Income is from something, income is an income producing asset, is my point. So, with that being said, I want to talk about ownership, owning the right type of asset. The people who have gotten wealthy in this world have figured out a way to own something that everyone needs to survive, that everyone needs to keep the economy going. That is a very important and integral commodity. So there are three layers to there are three um, resources that you should focus on owning. Um, and one of those, the first one is primary um, primary assets to own. You want to own natural resources in any kind of way you can. I'm talking land, oil, timber, gold, coal, water, and the list continues. You want to own those assets that people can't do without, that people need to either build a product, build products, buildings, build up society. You want to own not necessarily stock. You want to actually own something that people need from the ground, right? Something that people need. And once you own an asset like that, you will get compensated in such a way that you will be wealthy. So those are all like natural resources, are a primary type of wealth, um, primary sources of wealth is my point. So, all right. So the next one is the secondary source of wealth. Sources of wealth are um, business. Owning a business is a secondary source of wealth. Like this, and as far as ranking goes, is level number two. So like a business that provides a service, you know, to support the land ownership, the oil creation, gold, timber, facilitating the how those assets create money and how that works in society is another way to build wealth for yourself. So owning a secondary um, source of wealth is a good place. It's a good kind of thing to have your money in. Now, tertiary, a lot of us, this is why it's hard for people to build wealth in America, because a lot of us go to school and or hear from our family that to build wealth, go to work, get a good job, and buy some stock, buy a house, buy some ETFs, get some hoard some cash, um, and all these different things. We That's what we're told. We're never told that we need to be owning assets in the primary class: gold, land, timber, coal, water, minerals, you know, all these different things that really, when you own them, they put more money in your pocket because they are actually the source, like um, the bread and butter of wealth creation lies in natural resources. And you want to own something that relates to that, or you want to be supporting that. Secondarily, um, the secondary source of wealth is obviously the business itself, the one that produces a service, provides a service, produces a product that comes from the natural resources. to go into society. Tertiary, like I said, tertiary source of wealth is paper, stocks, bonds, ETFs, derivatives, cash, even Bitcoin. So those are tertiary sources of wealth, and they're not really stable sources. You can make a lot of money in them, and that's another thing, right? But you want to actually own something in one of the first two levels, two sources, the primary source and the secondary source. So a lot of us just want to own a business, but you can't just create a business. You want to create a business that is a part of the economy in a real way. It's a main player in the economy. Okay? So with that being said, that is that. That is that for Wealth Wednesday today. I talk a lot about building businesses. I talk a lot about how to become wealthy, and those are the sources. The primary source of wealth, primary class, you know, secondary, tertiary. So with that being said, you guys, that's all I have today for Wealth Wednesday. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys so much. Thank you so much again for subscribing, liking my video, commenting. See you next time. Have a good day. Thanks for listening. All right, guys. This is just for a lot of you who are wondering how we're doing here in Minneapolis. We're doing pretty good. At least me and my family, we're doing all right. We live far. We live about 20 minutes from downtown Minneapolis, or actually from Minneapolis city border. Uh, so we're not really close to any of everything that's happening there in the city, but I do have a property that is not too far from where everything's happened, literally a block away from where everything was happening, like the main areas near Lake Street and that stuff. So, I drove by there a week ago and I just saw that all the businesses and places that were lively where had a lot of people walking around were boarded up. And I saw some MRAPs, military vehicles, tactical vehicles patrolling the streets or just kind of parked on the side of the road and that kind of stuff. So that's what I've seen over here. I That's affected my people, my contractors, people who work for me, are kind of afraid of going into, or have told me that they're afraid of going into Minneapolis because they don't want to be a part of any riots or any looting or anything. They don't want to be caught in that and jeopardize their safety that way. So that's what's going on in Minneapolis. But this week, and at the end of last week, things were dying down, and everyone that's been paying attention to Minneapolis, I think everyone just saw that the city of Minneapolis just promised to pretty much dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, really defund it, and kind of restructure it. So that was, I think it was done like not this last Sunday, but the Sunday before. I just don't remember exactly. So with that being said, that's what's happening here. It seems like our state is taking action to resolve the issue of police brutality. However, my opinion is we just need to make sure that we understand on both sides, Black Lives Matter movement side and the people against this, and people who are pro police, pro blue, so to speak. And this issue should not even be divisive. But in the real world, it is divisive. People take sides. Um, so, but anyway, I just want everyone to know when it comes to like this issue of George Floyd, police brutality, and all this stuff. This is a long war. This is not over just because some legislations were passed, or it looks like people got what they wanted. This is a thing that's going to continue to be fought about in courts and are, like the Minnesota legislation, legislative body. This is going to be a thing that's an ongoing fight, and it's going to bring up a lot of different things. I can see that happening within the next year, or happening for at least another year or two, or probably just a long time. So a lot of people, there's been a lot of gains here for people who protested peacefully, um, and I just want everyone to realize that it's not over yet, so to speak. So with that being said, we're safe and we're sound here in Minneapolis. So thank you. I just wanted to share that, you guys.